Good to see you all again. So we're coming to the end of the month after this week. Already weird. And to continue talking during this Hispanic Heritage Month about Hispanic Americans who are on their way to sainthood, I'm going to talk about this woman, Venerable Maria Consuelo Soledad Sanjurjo Santos. Here's a picture of her, and you can see her dates there, 1892 to 1973. So I guess she was naturalized as an American citizen, but she wasn't born, or she was born before the Congress gave Puerto Rican citizenship. Nevertheless, she became an American citizen. She was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. That's where she spent most of her, or a large portion of her life, born there. She died there. And she, as you can maybe see from her habit, she was a nun or a sister. And when she was 16, she joined the Servants of Mary Ministers to the Sick. The Servants of Mary Ministers to the Sick. Okay, so she entered the Servants of Mary when she was 16, and she spent the rest of her life as a nun. And she did a lot of things in her order. She was a good, holy woman. She was in the administration of her religious group, obviously serving the sick, I would imagine, because that was their ministry. But she also became the secretary and something called a conciliar of the group. I guess I don't know what the conciliar is, so I shouldn't say what it is. But she rose up in authority in the group, in the authority structure. And she was whatever that is, a secretary and conciliar for 10 years. But then she became, numero uno, or maybe I should say numero una. Became Mother Superior of the whole congregation. And she moved to Cuba, that's where the headquarters of the congregation was, or of the group. So that's where she moved. And she stayed there for 40-some years, I guess as Mother Superior. And then she had a heart attack. So, you get old and stuff goes wrong. So she had a heart attack, and I guess she couldn't be Mother Superior anymore. So they moved her back to Puerto Rico to recuperate and live out the rest of her life, which she did, living a simple life of loving God and serving the group that she had joined, the sisters, the servants. She spent her time sewing clothes for the sisters, praying. I would hope so. I would hope so if she's a saint, talking to God, and assisting the sick. And she was a sister for 62 years, so a long time, most of her life. And she died in 1973 in San Juan, Puerto Rico again. And so there she is. She's on their website. She's venerable. She's on her way towards sainthood. In the second phase, venerable. They do have a saint for this group, Saint Maria Soledad, which can be a little bit confusing because it's like the same name almost, Maria Soledad. Maybe that's the name she took in religion. But she's venerable. They just call her Soledad Sanjurjo Santos. Okay. This is their website. If you want to see some of the nuns, here they are. They look like happy women. Taking care of the sick. Here we go. Karl Marx is usually grouped with sociology. You could also throw Karl Marx into politics and economics, but he also is grouped in with sociology. I got to get back to that. Hold on one second. So I skipped over something that I should have. Oh, here we go. I got to come back to something and talk about it, but I'll do that in a minute. It's about the sacred. It's for phenomenology. Because I skipped over it and forgot to mention it. Okay, sociology. Karl Marx. You can see his dates there. 1818 to 1883. Of German extraction. I think also Prussia. I think he might have been from Prussia as well, but don't quote me on that. But I know he's German. And, he was focused a lot on economics and the structure of economics. But he thought, as everyone wanted to be scientific. So, evolution Remember Charles Darwin, evolution was the main system that everyone wanted to emulate in the sciences. So yeah, even, like just in sociology, the sociologists thought they could map the evolution of human society. Marx thought that he could map how economics grew, how business transactions. And so, you had different levels. You had capitalism, where you have bartering, people bartering stuff, you just do this for me and I'll do that for you. And then it turns into like money where, you do this for me, or I hire you to do something and I give you a wage, okay, which is symbolic of some money, symbolic of value, okay. And then eventually, in his mind, workers would start grouping together to assert themselves, assert their control over the means of production, the factories or the mines or the farms or wherever they were working. So they're not just working for them, they are not just working for somebody else at them, they're now working, the farm is theirs, so they have a stake in it. And eventually everything would be, that would be socialism. And then socialism would evolve into communism, where everything was held in common by the community. Nothing was anyone's specifically. Ownership was shared, so there were no owners of anything, okay, or controllers, And a commune is just, like a committee. It's another word for a committee. A commune would be, you have, well, you see this in communist countries. That's how their governments are organized. They're communist. So China's communist. The head of the Chinese government, Jinping Xi, or Xi Jinping, depending on which way you want to put it, is, not elected. He is elected in a way, but he's elected the head of the committee of the Communist Party. Okay? So everything's run by committee in the commune. Everyone has a voice. No one is more equal than anybody else. No one's the leader. There might be someone who's the head of the committee or the commission, or there might be several heads, but everyone has a vote in it. So that's the view of communism. Everyone's in control. At least that was how Marx thought society would eventually develop. He just thought it would develop that way naturally, He wasn't a revolutionary. He just thought that's how economically society would eventually develop. When you get to Marxist-Leninism, when we get Vladimir Lenin in Russia, his special sauce, or the little spice that he threw into Marxist ideas was the idea of revolution, that by violence you can move the process along. You can move it from capitalism to socialism by just overthrowing the capitalists violently, and you establish a socialist paradise. But that's still not the end, because your ultimate goal is communism, not socialism. Okay? So, for example, in the old Soviet Union, Russia, sometime, I think it was maybe in the 50s or something, they declared they had finally reached all their benchmarks for establishing a socialist paradise. So now their next endeavor, their plans were to, how do we push that to then finally establish and realize true communism as per Marx's theories and stuff like that. Which, of course, they never did. It all fell apart, but whatever. Well, I shouldn't say it all fell apart, because China is still communist, North Korea is still communist, Cuba, speaking of Cuba, is still communist. They're still carrying the flag. For this idea of Marx, okay, I'm not an economist, so I can't speak with any sense of authority on it. I can just kind of tell you what I've heard, what I understand Marx's idea to have been. But one of the basic, where religion comes into play, Mr. Moon, is that religion is part of is one of the tools that the owners of the society use to keep people in their place and to keep them kind of mystified and unaware of how oppressed they are. Religion is one of those things, amongst other things as well, but religion is a big factor. It legitimizes the unjust control, the harsh control of the ruling class, So, slaves, be obedient to your masters, as St. Paul writes in one of his, actually more than, not just St. Paul, St. Peter also writes that in one of his letters, but St. Paul writes in one of his letters, I'm trying to remember which one it is. Well, anyways, because he does it more than once. But he advises Christians slavery was part of the economic structure of, most societies, certainly the Roman Empire at the time. And Paul doesn't challenge that. He just said, okay, if you're a Christian but you're a slave, then just be obedient to your master, be a good Christian, be obedient. So he uses, like Christ is obedient to the Father. So from Marx's point of view, like this guy Paul is using religion to justify the unjust situation and get the slave to accept his or her lot by appealing to God. Well, God will reward you in another life if you live religiously. Don't worry about how you're being screwed over or being beaten by your master, or whatever's going on in the religion. It mystifies is the idea. Like a drug, it makes people forget or not realize, there he is, the origins of their oppression, the reality of their oppression. It makes them it's kind of like, you go into at church, they might admit the world is screwed up, but there's a better world awaiting you. Okay, but what? They don't ever really seem to talk. Maybe in your church they do, but this was Mark's impression. In, say, Christian churches or whatever, they don't seem to talk very much about what the people could actually do to change the screwed up world, right? What can like the pastors or the priests aren't up there saying, okay, here's a 5-step plan for how we're going to deal with how we're getting screwed by this corporation or the government or whatever. No, because that would be revolutionary, right? That might get them into trouble with people in power, The NSA might infiltrate them or something. The FBI might open a file on them, No, you push it on. Well, yeah, I know we're getting screwed over, but don't worry. You'll be with Jesus in the next life, You'll have a crown waiting for you in heaven. So they mystify the impression. And in some way they validate it. They've even validated it because, hasn't God put these people in authority? Didn't God allow so-and-so to be elected president? Or didn't God put some so-and-so in power as king or queen? So they reign, right? From that position or rule from that position. And so the religion validates it. So, for example, it's right there. We don't see it so much because we don't have a monarchy, but it's certainly there if you're living in the United Kingdom in England, where King Charles III is also the head of the Church of England. So, of course, you go to church, they're going to have a prayer for the monarch. You're going to pray for Charles III to God in the Church of England. We don't do that here in Episcopal churches, even though they're technically part of the Church of England, because, even though he is technically is part of the Church of England, and the Episcopalians are Anglicans. But anyways, but they don't pray for the king. But yeah, religion is now legitimating the order of monarchy. One person in charge. Why? Why should this one person be in charge? Because he was born by somebody? And he can trace his lineage to somebody else? Some other group of people? No one elected that group of people to be in charge and have all this land and all that sort of stuff. Castles and all sorts of things. But the religion legitimates it in Mark's view. Legitimates the King of England as the head of the church by making him the head of the church. Or I should say the King of England made himself the head of the church. And the Church of England just kind of goes along with it and says, okay. It's a part of the political system. And it really is, because even like bishops in the Church of England are referred to the prime minister of the government, not to the king. The king ultimately, in this case King Charles, but before that it was Queen Elizabeth, ultimately the monarch will make the approval, because technically he or she is the head of the church. But it's the prime minister, the head of the government. Imagine the governor of Pennsylvania choosing who's going to be the Archbishop of Philadelphia, or who's going to be pastor at, Foursquare Bible Christian Church, or who's going to be the new rabbi at Beit Shalom. But that's what goes on. The prime minister of the United Kingdom gets a list, and he decides, and he proposes, or she, to the monarch. So legitimation. So religion is like a drug. This is a very famous statement of Marx. If anyone remembers anything about Karl Marx, they remember this famous statement. Would anyone like to read this statement from Marx? Anybody? I had thought that you would, so let's see who else doesn't. Maybe wants to participate. Is that Mr. Gaines? He must have a night job or something. When he comes to school, Mr. Gaines. Was he covered? Oh, no. Sorry. You want to read it? Like that, is it? Klitsch? Mr. Klitsch?
Yeah, I'll do it.
You up to the plate? Go ahead.
Religion is the side of the oppressed creature, the heart of the heartless world. Just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation, it is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illiteracy, happiness of the people is required for their real happiness.
Yes, okay, so this is in a work, you can find this online, it's in the public domain. It's a contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right. Okay, so he was responding to another philosopher called, was it Gottfried Hegel? I always forget what his first name is, but anyways, Hegel was very popular in the 1800s, very influential. And he's critiquing, okay, so he's making a contribution to that critique of Hegel's idea of rights, of the rights that people have. I forget what his criticism was, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. This is the work in which he makes this famous statement about religion. Religion is like a big duchy. It's your heart. You forget all about it. It's the opium of the people. That was the drug of choice. Everyone was taking opium in the 1800s. I don't know why. And cocaine. Cocaine became big. But opium, yeah. And that's what religion is like. It's a drug. The people who are oppressed, okay, who can't handle the fact that the world is heartless, because he, of course, also was an atheist, I should add. So there was no God to save you. So the world is just a heartless world. And if you're getting screwed by it, there's no one to save you from it. So, religion provides that kind of out. Okay, the spirit of a spiritless situation. It drugs you. And like any drug, it makes you feel good, but it also muddles your senses so you don't see things maybe as they really are. It gives people an escape from their suffering, so they don't feel so bad when they have to go outside the church or the mosque or the synagogue and realize what kind of lousy country they live in, or how everything's under everyone else's control or a few people's control. At least in church, they can act like that's not the case. Like a person, and for Marx, that's no different than someone who just decides to go to a little pot shop and get some dope, put it in modern parlance, because we wouldn't do opium, but we do dope. I don't know, is marijuana legal in Pennsylvania? Is it's illegal in Pennsylvania? Yeah, medical, yeah. You smoke it, right? Yeah, which is, of course, so good for your lungs. Telling a doctor to smoke something and destroy your lungs, but it's okay. medical. Yeah, it's fully legal now in New Jersey. And it's okay, all right, fine, we're going to do this. But I noticed that, like, they popped up all over the place. All over the place. Even more than the liquor stores. Well, people are unhappy. People, they have no control. I guess it's better to get them drugged, Mr. Saunders, than have them go violent on us. At least, they're drugged, they're high, they're happy. In this case, get them on religion. So at least they have hope. So, religion. He described it like a chain around your neck, like a slave's chain around your neck with flowers on it. That's how Marx described religion. But just because the chain has pretty sweet-smelling flowers on it doesn't make it any less than a chain. It's still a chain, and you're still a slave. All right, what can that mean for religion and violence? This sociological view. Getting back to our ultimate question, which is religion and violence. Well, if we're looking at Durkheim, we see that religion can be an antidote against violence. So, for example, in his book on suicide, he found that some forms of Christianity, the Roman Catholic form, for instance, had acted well in addressing self-harm, like suicide. It gave people a kind of spiritual outlet. It made them feel like they weren't so alone. It made they were still depressed. Maybe they still wanted to die, but they didn't feel like they were alone. They had outlets. So they wouldn't commit violence to themselves. So religion, from Durkheim, there's kind of a positive view of religion and violence where religion is an antidote against it. It redirects the violent tendency that the person has to harm themselves, or maybe to harm other people as well, into something else. From Marx's perspective, if religion is a form of oppression, or at least it's part of the whole system of oppression, then ought it not to be overthrown? Shouldn't religion be overthrown along with the oppressive system that it's a part of? It may not have created the oppressive system, but it certainly helped the leaders out. God bless America. We're not going to say that anymore. Thoughts and prayers, we're not going to say that anymore. Because you're just using it, just words. And you're not solving the problem or something. So you have to overthrow religion as well. And if you're going to overthrow it, does that not also entail violence, but from the non-religious side? So, yeah, with the communist revolution, wherever the communist revolution took place, the Marxist revolution in the Soviet Union, in China, I don't know how much in North Korea, but in other places where it happened, one of the first things they did was blow up the churches. You can see this on YouTube if you want. You had all these old pictures from the old Soviet Union showing them going through, ransacking the churches, people going through and, hacking down the icon, the sacred pictures, and, taking all the vestments of the priests and their cups and their gold chalices and stuff like that, and then ultimately blowing stuff up, just blowing up the churches. Because they were part of the oppression of what at that time was, it was an empire, the Russian Empire, with the Tsar, who was the monarch, the Tsar, and the Tsar, the government and the Russian Orthodox Church were hand in glove. You couldn't have one without the other. So if you're going to overthrow the Tsar, in which they did, they killed the whole family. God bless you. Tracked them all down and killed almost all of them. I think they got pretty much all of them, all their descendants. I don't think there are any descendants of the Romanov family anymore. Is there one in Florida? I think there's some guy in Florida who might have a lineage to the Romanovs somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, they basically you had to kill them all, not just get rid of them. And you kill the priests. You send them to gulags, to concentration camps. You get rid of them, the religious leaders, and you blow up the churches and all that stuff. And you start fresh. Violence, but you got to use violence against the oppression. And religion's part of it. Same thing in China. Just different religions. Buddhists, Taoists. Confucianism really wasn't more of a philosophy than Confucius was more of a kind of a moral philosopher than a religious figure, but nevertheless, it got lumped in with all this other stuff. And when Mao Zedong, the guy who started the communist Marxist revolution in China, one of the first things they did, other than overthrowing the government and establishing the communist government, was just destroy the temples, or at least shut them down. If you're not going to destroy them, close them, kill all the Buddhist monks, put them into prison, take over Tibet, conquer Tibet and keep it under Chinese control. Foreign missionaries, the Western missionaries, the Christians, expel them. The Catholic Church, break it off from the Pope. Violence. They had to do violent things. Against religion, it was necessary. It was necessary because you had to, it's like, a drug addict who's going through withdrawal. You got to break them of the drug. And sometimes that can be violent. Now lock them in a room and not let them out for a few days until the drug's out of the person's system. Yes. There we go. China. Communist revolution. Look what he's stomping on and smashing with a sledgehammer. Buddhist statue of the Buddha, the crucifix, Western music, records, Western music, decadence, our decadence, Western society. Ways are being oppressed. Oh, break the old world, create the new world. That's what the Chinese language, that's what the Chinese words mean, characters mean. In case you were wondering. Okay, anthropology. Anthropology, the study of humanity. Anthropology. Anthropos in Greek means a human being. So we don't have that distinction in English. The word man functions both for male human beings, but it also means just general human being. Okay? So you could say a woman is a man. Just as a man is a man, It just sounds the same. It doesn't necessarily mean, it's not necessarily sexist. It's just the way it developed in Anglo-Saxon, okay? Other languages have different words, Anthropos is a human being. If you're specifically talking about a woman, it's gune, gynecology, right? Study of women. Or, the treatment of female things that are, medical conditions that afflict females in specific. But if you're talking about a male human being, it's aner. It's a different word, aner. Anthropos, a human being, and logion means a word or statement. So the study of human beings or statements about human beings as creators. A lot of anthropology focuses very much on culture. Human beings as the creators and the creations of their culture. Their culture. What is culture? Do I even give a definition of culture? Oh, I think I do. What is culture? Well, interestingly enough, the word culture comes from cultus in Latin. Should have put that down there on the PowerPoint. I forgot to do my etymology. Which is used for another word from Latin, which they also use to talk about religion, worship. Worship, cultus, where we get our word cult from. Which has no negative connotation. It just means worship. Cultus. So that's interesting that the basis of the word culture is already religious. Religion's embedded in this idea of culture. But anyways, what is culture? Complex system of knowledge. This seems like this definition is too long, Mr. Ruddle. Well, whatever. Knowledge, beliefs, ways of life, ethics, because ethics could be collapsed into beliefs or ways of life. law, artistic expression, and any other customs or habits received by a person as part of a social group. Okay, so your knowledge of the world, the way that you think, the way that you believe, art forms, the way that you live, and any other customs you want to throw into the bag that you receive from your social group. So since every social group is different, then the culture is different. Maybe very similar in some ways. It might be the same language. You know, you might speak, they speak German in Germany. We also speak German in Austria. Speak German in Liechtenstein. Speak some German in Switzerland. And in parts of Italy. But the cultures are different. Why? Because the social groups are different. Austrians are not Germans, even though they speak that language. And maybe ethnically they're Germans as well. But their way of life is different, their history is different, okay? So they have different customs in the way they live their lives. Certainly the Germans in, say, Switzerland, which is a mixed bag. You have people of French ancestry in Switzerland and Italian ancestry and other ancestry. So, you know, their social group is going to be different. So it's affecting the culture that you're receiving, even if some things are very much the same, like maybe your politics, or your language, or the food, stuff like that might be very similar or the same. But, I mean, don't tell an Austrian that he's a German. Because it wasn't Austrians that invaded Austria. It was the Germans who invaded us. If you're an Austrian and overthrew our government and installed a Nazi puppet government, you know, and conquered us. I speak German, but we didn't start the concentration camps. I grew up in Vienna, not Berlin. So anthropology, culture, cultura. Cultura also, that's interesting. Maybe I put it on the next PowerPoint. No, I didn't. Okay. Cultura, which I said comes from worship. And this is interesting because it comes back to the Numenes. Remember the Numen, Ms. Krause? The Numenes, Ms. Cook? Remember? Yes? Oh, no, you weren't here for that class. For the Numinous experience, right? The Numen. Yes. Watch the video, please, Ms. Cook, if you haven't already. Cultivation, culture. So farming. Okay? And by extension, cultivation can also mean kind of work or education or training that you receive. Okay? It doesn't mean literally farming. But again, what's the connection? What connection am I making between farming, or do I see between farming and worship, cultus? Well, remember the Numenes, right, Miss Jasmine? I'm the best at being there. I'm very pleased. I see you're actually writing stuff down. God bless you, sir. God bless you. We should thank you. On the other hand. Anyways. The Numens, right? What were they? What are the Numenes? What are the Numenes? What is a Numen? Yeah, you see, you can look at his notes, right? He's got them written down, Mr. Moon. The Numenes, the Numen. What's a Numen?
The human being's experience of the Holy Savior.
Okay, good.
Is a powerful feeling.
Good.
Awe, terror, yet fascination.
All right, did you write that about Numen?
Oh, no.
No, you didn't do that.
Latin.
Huh?
Latin?
Yes, Latin. Numen.
Lumen is not about.
Huh?
Lumen is not about what divine will.
Oh, you wrote it down on your computer. Let's see. Okay, good. But where does the word numinous come from? Why is it called the numinous experience? Why is this word numinous used for the sacred or the holy? What did it derive from? Don't know? All right. They'll be on quiz number 2, just so you know.
So did it.
Where did it come from?
Who was more who?
Who? Where does it come from? The Latin word numen, but what does it mean? So what is its use?
What's he saying?
Huh?
What's that?
You know, Mr. House?
No,
Why aren't you looking at your notes to see?
I'm looking at the section right here, and I'm told
You don't have it? Uh-oh.
we wrote down the whole page.
Try to write down everything I say, except for the jokes.
So it's like you looking. I was just listening, but Newman is somebody who can.
Numen's not a person.
Newman is not a person.
It is not.
Oh, it's just an experience.
Nope. A numen was the word for spirits. Of what? Spirits of what? Don't look it up. Don't ask AI. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My bad. I apologize. That was bad. Spirits of what?
Holy or sacred?
Good, okay. They're sacred, they're holy because they're spirits. But what were they spirits of? Remember me, the nod of the head, right? A numen is a nod of the head and you bowing the head. So would be the farmers.
Not picking up, putting down.
What is the numenes were the spirits of the earth that the farmers had to honor, or thought they had to honor, so they'd get a good crop. That's where ultimately the word comes from, where Otto took it from. Yeah, he took it from that, in Latin. The spirit is a general spirit, the spirits that inhabit the natural world, you know. In the case of farmers, you want to make sure, you want to have control, you want to make sure that your corn doesn't rot or, you know, everything grows. Yeah, you have a drought or something, so you offer a sacrifice or some form of worship to the spirits of the land. Lunes. Okay, cultura, cultivation, farming. You see again the connection. The ancient world, a lot of people were, well, hunter-gatherers, but, you know, when farming started and we figured out how to farm, which always fascinates me how human beings even figured that out, because it's extremely complicated. But anyways, you know, worshiping the spirits so that you'll get a good yield. So again, culture, farming, farming, and cultus, worship. So those ideas again come together. Numen, the farmers worship the numens. Numenes, yes. Are you going to leave the things on all the time?
Yeah, they're comfortable.
The whole class?
They're comfortable.
Oh, they are?
Listening too.
What, did he say he's actually listening to? No fear.
No, I mean listening to you.
Oh, okay. Maybe, you see what? Again, my bad. Bad Dr. Dunn. All right. Where am I going with this? I don't know. So, but my point is that the root of culture is religious. The root of culture is actually religious, not just in the very word culture. We have a religious meaning. What unites the society or a culture is how they all together honor their common gods or spirits or ancestor figures. So religion is basic to human society. Hence, you can imagine that anthropologists are going to study it. This is on the PowerPoint, but not in my notes. So I'll mention it now. So just to give you an example, now from Indian culture, this is the goddess of India, Indra. It is the statue of Indra. Okay. And so India is actually represented as a god. You worship her. So you worship your country in India. Hindus worship their country. Because that's what Hindu means. I mean, it means person from the Indus River. Okay? Sanskrit. And to be an Indian, you have the Pitir Bhumi. Pitir means father. And Bhumi means your country, your land, the earth of your fathers. Your Pitir Bhumi. And you also have your Punya Bhumi. Punya is the Sanskrit version of sacred or holy. Also, it means lucky, to be lucky or something. So, the land of the sacred. So, for an Indian, where you are born, coming from India, the religion and the land of your birth are one and the same thing. So, an Indian cannot be, by definition, a Muslim or a Christian or anything other than a Hindu. At least that's the logic, which is now causing all sorts of problems in India. Okay? Because they're calling it Hindu nationalism. Hindutva. Hindu fundamentalism. Where Hindus are inserting themselves and trying to say that anyone who is not for... You may have been born, and maybe you're Pitir Bhumi, you may have been born in India, the country of India, but if you do not follow the sacred or the religion of India, which is Hinduism, in some way or variety, you're not truly part of India. So they keep having kerfuffles between the Hindu population and the Muslim population, and smaller population. There are tens of millions of Christians in India. Christianity's been there for like 2,000 years, a long, long time, but not long enough. It's still seen as a foreign religion. It's been there for like 2,000 years. But whatchamacallit, it's the country has over 1 billion people, so there are 30 or 40 or some millions of Christians. That's not very many. But there's always this problem, if a person becomes a Christian, then say converts from Hinduism to Christianity, they lose government benefits. Because the government says, well, you're not a Hindu anymore. You're not truly Indian. You're a Christian now. So certain government benefits, kind of like affirmative action for the past, where they had the caste system, when you had people, a very structured society of people on the top and people on the bottom. So they have kind of like an affirmative action thing going on to lift up the lower castes that were put down for so long. But that only applied to Hindu society. You're not a Hindu anymore, then none of that applies to you. So we take away your government benefits. So it's kind of like a control on keeping people from converting to foreign, non-Indian religious faiths. Because they're together. The land of your fathers and the land of your religion. So, anthropologists describe religious beliefs and practices as they find them in these living communities of humanity. How they look at how religion unites people in a shared experience and explanation of life, how it offers patterns of behavior. Okay? Now, I mentioned India, but we've got our own little worship problem going on here in the United States. As I pointed out to you when we looked at that football game, remember, at the very beginning of the course, the NCAA football game, an athletic event, but then you have American flags being brought in, the American military being brought in, people are praying, people are evoking religious symbols, they're painting crosses on their faces, and all sorts of, there's all this big mixture of like religion, politics, violence, athletic. But here we go. I remember when I went, when I was in like high school, we took a trip to Washington, D.C. Some of you have done that as well. And I went, and I think this might be in the Capitol building, but wherever it was, always remembered seeing this. I looked up, because this was on a ceiling, if I remember. I looked up, and I see, like, Jesus. Like, it was Jasmine. I'm like, Jesus is in the Capitol building. I thought, separation of church and state. What a. And I look closer. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's George Washington. Rising. Doesn't he look like he's dressed up like Jesus, coming out of a tomb with an angel, going up into the light? This almost looks like the Virgin Mary. Weird. Huh? That's a good question. I don't know. Divinizing him. Making him into a god. That's exactly what it says. The Apotheosis of Washington by John James Bareillet. I'm assuming it's pronounced Bareillet. Apotheosis. That also means God. The making of God. Of Washington. Now, they didn't really believe that Washington was a god, but it's an artist, giving him honor. You see that also, this is not the only picture I could have shown. If you go to the Capitol building, they've got statues of George Washington half naked. Have you seen that? Where he's like sitting, he's naked all the way down to his chest, and they, of course, have him covered over. Right there. It's based on the ancient statues of the god Zeus. So we have a little bit of country worship going on. We haven't gone as far as the Indians, where they have a whole goddess that you can worship for India, but we've got this. This is in our culture as well. So look at this. Anthropologists look at these things. This is just our American version of this. Just different cultures, but it's the same idea that's kind of going on here. We're worshiping ourselves. We're worshiping ourselves. E.B. Tyler is the father of anthropology. Edward Burnett Tyler. You can see his dates there. Why is he the father of anthropology? Not just because he wrote about it. He was from Britain. He was from Great Britain, from a Quaker family. Some of you might know the Quakers or Quaker meeting houses all over the place around here. But the British Quakers, from what I'm told, are a little bit different from the Quakers in America. Nevertheless, I guess they come from the same roots. Nevertheless, okay. And he got sick. He was not feeling very well. And according to the medical theory of the 1800s, a warmer climate was supposedly healthier than a stale climate, kind of like in England, where it's always rainy and damp. So so the recommendation of the doctor was, I can't believe we went to medical school to give this, take a vacation, go to some warmer climate for your health. So, he went to a place that I guess is as warm as you could get. He went to Central America, took a trip to Central America in 1855. Okay? And what makes him the father of anthropology is that he was observant and he wrote down all the stuff he was experiencing. It was a very different culture from him as a British Quaker, because now he's in Central America, which is a mixture, which of course religiously was Catholic, but also you have all the the mixture of Hispanic culture from Spain with the Native American cultures, okay, all that stuff. So he just described the customs, and he took careful notes of the various customs and beliefs of these cultures, and published them. He wrote about his experiences, Anahuac, or Mexico and the Mexicans, ancient and modern. Yeah, I know that's not Central America, but close enough. Anyways, yeah, you can. I don't know that he made that hard and fast distinction between Mexico and Central America. But anyways, that was the region he was in. So he wrote about what he saw, and again, systematically, just like, what's his name? Max Mueller wanted to study religion systematically. Auguste Comte wanted to study societies systematically. What makes him the father of modern anthropology is that he wanted to study human civilizations as a system and see, how we could see how cultures develop and evolve. Oh, again, we bump into evolution again. How do cultures evolve from primitive, the first, to more developed and sophisticated? Okay, so he wrote Anahuac, then he wrote Primitive Culture, which was a landmark study in human civilization, and got people really interested in this idea. Wait, there are these things called humans. We can study us. We can study us too. There's also kind of a little bit of racism going on here, because it's not like people were going out to the streets of London and studying other white people, these white European scholars. Or let's go to Paris and do an anthropological study of, Parisians and cigarettes or something. No, we'll go to Africa. We'll go to Australia, where people with clearly different skin colors. And so there is a tinge of racism. Yes, you're studying, it's like everyone else in the world becomes your laboratory. But it's not like you're doing anthropological studies in your own country, because that's normal, right? Why would an anthropologist, an English anthropologist be in like Leicester? Or an American anthropologist? What would he have to study in New York City? It's normal. But the Amazon, that's exotic. They don't always wear clothes. So that's kind of an issue you have to be aware of with anthropology. Nevertheless, people became interested in this. And in 1896, Tyler was appointed as Britain's first professor of anthropology. People even called it Mr. Tyler's science. They didn't even call it anthropology. It was Mr. Tyler's science. Where was he appointed? I didn't put the school down. I'm assuming Oxford, but I shouldn't say. Nevertheless, he was given a professorship in it. And of course, when you become a professor, that's always an indicator of where the value is. That's when something means something. Thank you. Mr. Tyler's claim to fame, remember his definition of religion, right? The belief in spiritual beings. Spirits, right, Mr. Saunders? Or in Latin, anima. Anima is the word for a spirit or soul in Latin. So Tyler came up with this idea I don't know if he came up with the word, but it's called animism. Animism, which is the belief that the physical world, the material world, is inhabited by spirits, by animae, souls, spirits. And that was, Tyler's theory. He thought all religion was basically animism was basically the was the basis for all religion. Animism in the evolutionary process. Animism was the earliest stage in human religious development. And, animism, at least as a word, has stuck around. His idea, I don't know if people still follow his idea. He didn't really prove his idea or base it on, proof or evidence. He did it more from reasoning about his experiences and what he thought. And just to give you, in a nutshell, with animism, he kind of thought that, since I have a mind and I kind of think for myself and I experience the presence of something, a person within myself, but when I go to sleep, right, I have dreams, which in some cultures, they really do think it's like a separate reality, right? In some cultures, some human cultures, it's like a completely different reality. You have another life, or you're out of body in a sense. You have another body. And then when you wake up, you're back in present body, okay? And he kind of ran with this and said, this must be where like the idea of a soul, you know, in us came, or religion itself of another world, you know, where from our dreaming experiences, where we just reason, early human beings just reason that, well, you know, if I can leave my body and go to this other place, there must be this other place that's not the natural world with other weird beings in it, you know, and stuff like that. That's in a nutshell. It doesn't really matter. I mean, no one, I don't think, really follows this. He wasn't proving anything. He was all just thinking philosophically, like, how did he suppose it could have happened that religion could have developed in this way, that people could think that there were spirits outside of them in physical objects? How could that have developed? Ultimately, I don't think we know, you know, because we weren't there. And usually with developments like this, you know, things just kind of happen. People are not usually thinking about things. Yeah, they're not like philosophers or academics. So you think from your field, you know. Doctors tend to think like doctors, you know. They see everything as a head. As what's the phrase? They see everything as a nail, and they're the hammer or something. But you know what I'm saying. And academics can be the same way. They think that, oh yeah, like, and these primitive people were sitting around the fire rationalizing, yeah, did you have a dream? Yeah, I had a dream. But what does that tell us? It was like it was a course or something, class. And people just believe things, I guess. I'm imagining. I don't know. Again, see, I'm imagining. I have to admit, I really don't know. No clue. But that's what he thought. And I don't think many anthropologists would follow that idea now, just like, you know, Mueller had his ideas about language and the words becoming the gods and stuff like that. But the animism has stuck around for the belief of spirits in the world. If you read the article by Barbara King, no, I don't, did I give you that article from Barbara King? Maybe I didn't. Ratke? Maybe it was Ratke. Yeah, Origin Stories in Religion and Introduction to Religious Studies. The 17, where are we here? Yeah, belongingness is one of the things that anthropologists identify as being an essential or necessary element of religion. That might be too broad, because there are other things that, you know, again, athletics, sports, politics give people belongingness. That doesn't make them religious. Remember the idea of a definition, it can't be so broad, because then if everything can be it, then really nothing is it. If you have too broad a definition, you need to set a boundary, belongingness. All right. And in the reading, Barbara King, it talks about Barbara King in the reading, her book Evolving God. Again, still the idea of evolution going on here. They still can't get rid of it, you know? I mean, a biological evolution is something different. That's a scientific a branch of science. But applying that to anthropology, I think anthropologists, just like sociologists, just like religious studies people, kind of realized a few decades ago that the two don't necessarily mix very well, you know? Because as I said, human beings, it's like herding cats. You know, people do things and come up with things for all sorts of motivations and developments that are uncontrollable. But the anthropologist is assuming that culture evolves in a controlled way, that you can pinpoint and map out. Okay, well, this anthropologist Barbara King says belongingness is what's the essence of religion, and humans crave an emotional connection with others, which comes from our evolutionary history of other primates. I guess because the monkeys hang out in the jungle together, so they must want to be together. And so do we, because we are ultimately primates like them. Are you following the logic? Following the logic, but I'm not... Oh, here we go. Her book. I'm following the logic, but I'm not necessarily seeing the connection, you know, because I can't go up to... Okay. You know, I can't really go up to a chimpanzee and say, hey, Grandpa, you know, why do you and the other chimpanzees always hang out together? And he's going to tell me. Or she, you know? So how do you know that that's why the monkeys are hanging out together? You know, how can you assume? Or if we evolved, well, hominids showed up 300,000 years ago, maybe. And of course, primates were evolving for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years before that. Can't really, well, I guess we could build a time machine, go back and observe what our earliest primates were doing. Okay, I'll go with it. I'll go with it, Dr. King. You know, just like primates have. Anyways, and so this religion or, yeah, this emotional or this need, this craving for an emotional connection explains how we became, as King calls us, the spiritual ape. The ape that then grew a large brain, that stood up, created art, but also evolved God. Okay. All right, you know, she's got a PhD, you know, she's an anthropologist, and is well respected. Would like to read this. This is from her book, Evolving God. I picked this out. I've already basically explained this to you, but let's get it in her own words. How would an evolved primate express that? You know, it's like, put a million monkeys on a million typewriters for a million years, and one of them's going to produce Macbeth. Right? In the book. Yeah. Who wants to read it? Who wants to read it? Is Durant?
Okay.
Okay.
What's the second word, though?
Second word, hominid.
Hominid.
Us, homo, human, or us, homo. Hominids are early humans. They're the our earliest ancestors. Hominins and hominids are earliest ancestors.
The hominid need for belongingness rippled out, eventually expanding into a whole new realm, in tandem with, and in part driven by, changes in the natural environment, in the hominid brain, and most important, in caregiving practices. Something new emerged that went beyond empathy, through following, and imagination within the family and immediate group, and that went beyond consciousness expressed through action and meaning-making in the here and now. As I explained in chapters 6 and 7, language and culture became more complex as symbols and ritual practices began to play a more central role in how hominids make sense of their world. An earthly need for belongingness led to the human religious imagination and thus to the otherworldly realm of relating with God, gods, and spirits.
Yeah. So our earliest ancestors, all these things happened. There were changes in the natural environment. Our brains, or their brains, started changing as well and developing. But most importantly, something about caregiving. So I guess mothers taking care of the kids, father, whatever, taking care of the elderly, caregiving practices also changed. Okay?
Is that not a wrong something?
That's all you care.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it's kind of a run-on sentence. Yeah, kind of longish, but Ms. Durant, more to the point, you know, she's writing as if, you know, she's writing as if she were almost there, right? Caregiving practices changed. What caregiving practice? She observed this. I mean, part of science is observation. Empirical, right? Empiricism, experience, empiria. She has no experience of any of this, you know? What changes in the natural environment? Like, I don't know, it became warmer, colder, what? There was an ice age? But how do you, even if those things happened on the planet, how do you know that it affected a group of hominids somewhere on the planet? Well, you have to assume that it did. Caregiving? What caregiving were they given? Now, how do we know that? How do we know the hominid brain developed? We know what the brain looks like now, but do we have any specimens from a hominid's brain? We found their bones. We haven't found their brains. So you have to, again, make an assumption about how the brain developed. A lot of listeners, anyways, I'm not going to get into it. All right, okay. It's an interesting idea. Belongingness. Our earliest ancestors wanted to belong to a group, or wanted to have that safety of being in a group. And what's even safer than that, by belonging to a cosmic group where there are gods and spirits who are taking care of everything. Not just your local, Ms. Horan, I lost you already? You're gone? You checked out? My alarm didn't go off. Yeah, no, still got a few. So that's even better. So we evolved from this essential need that our early ape-like ancestors had for hanging out together and feeling safe. We must have, Ms. Cook, evolved this need through our imagination for another world that's beyond us, that keeps everything together. We all belong. We call that God. Okay. All right. Well, this is only from one page of her book. Page 7 is the opening part of her book. So I'm sure if I read the rest of the book, which I'm not going to do, Ms. Cook, spoiler alert, but I would imagine she would connect the dots for me. But as a person with a PhD as well, I understand that sometimes when they give you the PhD, Mr. Klitsch, they should not just give you the diploma, they should also give you a shovel.
Makes sense. Why a shovel?
I'll let you extrapolate that, sir. You're smart. All right. What does this mean for religion and violence? I lost you, and now I've lost Ms. Rogers. Mr. Rand, do you see what's going on? This is like a virus.
Would it be considered violence?
Huh?
Could that be considered violence?
What violence?
Packing up early.
Yeah, you're committing violence against me. You're harming my self-esteem. It's a microaggression to me. All right, well, what time is it? It's 3:06. My alarm didn't go off. Oh yeah, so I still got you for a few minutes. Let's see what I can do with this. What can this mean for religion and violence? From anthropology. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe I want to come back to this. All right, I'll let you go early today. God bless you all. See you on Thursday. All right, see you, Mr. Bracy. You too, miss. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good day. You're welcome, miss. Mr. Rand. Yes, sir. See ya, Mr. Gaines. See ya, Mr. Henry.
Hey, there we go.
Ricky.
In the east zone.
You need to get some sleep, sir.
Ooh.
Hey, Mr. Saunders, have a good day. She was not here. Okay. Hello. Nope. Have a good day, Miss Ewing. Ooh. See Miss Jasmine. Lazarus? No. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you're back, sir.
Go ahead.
Rogers. Saunders. All right. Oh, wait, I gotta turn my thing off. Where's the... Oh, come on. Where's the...